Good evening, America. Welcome to the Tuesday edition of Just the News, No Noise. I'm your host, John Solomon, reporting to you, as always, from Washington, D.C. and the WiredFishCoffee.com studios. You know this now. Wired Fish Coffee is the official coffee of the Solomon family. It's also the official coffee of Just the News. Why? Because it tastes great and it does good with every cup of coffee you drink. They donate 25% of their proceeds to Christian faith groups and, most importantly, to conservation, two causes I care deeply about. If you want to get 10% off all of their great items, including their great coffee blends, go right now to WiredFishCoffee.com and use the promo code JustNews, or just point your camera at that QR code. All right, a busy day in Washington. In just a few minutes, we're going to go live to the White House, where President Trump is emerging from a meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. They're going to take questions. There'll be a press conference. We're going to bring it to you live and unfiltered, as we always do, right here at Real America's Voice. What I'd like to do is I got my amazing co-host right alongside of me here in Washington now. Boy, it feels good to have Amanda right here. Day two of your Washington journey. We've got a great first guest because there's a lot of things going on in Congress today. And I think before the president comes out, we should get to him right away. Congressman, I like it. Tim Burchett from the great state of Tennessee. Congressman, great to have you in the show, sir.
Thanks for having me, brother. And my office took a poll, and they think you're at least the third most attractive male on television.
I'm moving up the ranks. There's hope for me yet. That's great.
Hey, and if I can't go to Ecuador and see a transgender show paid for by the American tax dollars, I don't think I'm going to go.
You're feeling deprived now that USAID might actually be forced to do its job. I want to turn to that because it has been a remarkable taking of Washington by storm. Donald Trump has flooded the zone with so many changes he promised. Washington is really changing. Tell us your sense of things just 10, 12 days in, 14 days into the president's new term.
Well, the interesting thing is, we talked about this USAID stuff before and just the abuses there. And the interesting thing now is the media realizes that they've gravely underestimated the conservative base, or just decent Americans that don't want their money, even liberals, they don't want their money spent on this crazy stuff. And so it's out of control. And you all have been leading the charge on this, and I salute you for it, because our great grandchildren's money that we're spending right now that's just not acceptable. A comic book in Peru for LGBTQ. You know what the State Department ought to be promoting? Democracy and capitalism. That used to be what we did best.
That's right.
But it's just social engineering it, billions and billions of American tax dollars. And I'll tell you what, the people up in upper East Tennessee and North Carolina that got hit by Hurricane Helene, some of those folks are still living in tents. Yep. And they haven't seen a penny of our money, but it's all going overseas.
Sir, I know that Republicans this time around are intent on getting things done, a flood the zone type offense. And you said something that actually reminded me of a possibility for Republicans. When you highlight the craziness of a policy, whether it is what we were just talking about, whether it's FEMA, whether it is in HHS, regardless of the agency, if you highlight the craziest parts of it, is that the best way to get bipartisanship so that you can pass more in shorter time?
I don't know. Sometimes you get more by losing, because it shows where they're going to vote and it shows what they're going to do. And I spent 16 years in the Tennessee General Assembly, and honestly, sometimes I did better getting my tail whipped, because it showed the folks back home what their people were voting on and what their priorities were. You had a sitting member of Congress and say that we are taking away essential services with this stuff, and there's nothing further from the truth. All they're doing is scaring poor folks. I met a couple of blind folks out here today that are here for this Day on the Hill. I'm sure they got a fancier name than that, but that's what I'm calling it. They're my friends. And they were worried about their funding. Nowhere, anywhere has anybody talked about that in any official documents. But the Democrats, that's what they're spearheading. You never hear them open their mouth without saying billionaire, billionaire, billionaire. And they always forget about Soros, their billionaire, and some of those .com billionaires that have been funding them for years, that have been pulling the strings on the Democrat side. So America's finally waking up, and I hope the Republican Party starts messaging better than we've been doing. It's, I guess, what do you expect from a guy in a powder blue leisure suit that still has an 8-track tape player that's 1972 Gremlin? So, And we're going to have to do some work on our messaging, folks.
It's great. So I want to ask a little bit about that fear mongering, because we were told yesterday the markets would crash because of the tariffs, and instead Donald Trump got really good deals from Canada and Mexico. Those sort of things are happening day in. We hear fear in the morning. By the end of the night, Donald Trump has another win. At what point does the American public just turn off the media and say, you know what, you're full of baloney?
I think they already have, but I think they better wake up too. We were such a thin majority in the House. I mean, one bad flu, literally one bad flu season, and we're out of the majority. Enough people don't show up, and they can take over. So I think folks better wake up. This victory lap they're on, they need to get their heads out of the sand. And
or some other location.
My daughter might be watching. I have to put another $1 in the swear jar. My swear jar is full of IOUs right now, by the way. But no, Republicans and conservatives better wake up. This so-called mandate we're on, mandate victory tour, we better get off of it and put our heads down and start working and lighten up the phones and lighten up the emails to your elected officials and letting them know this is not permittable. I'm tired of this nonsense. Cut it out and clean up this mess that Washington's become. You have people calling offices crying because they've got to go back to work. They've got to go back into their offices. They've been off for 4 years. You know, I guess we ought to pass a rule that says you can wear your underwear in your office, I guess, because that's all they're doing all day, sitting around ordering pizzas and sitting in their underwear. And so, you know, we got to wake up, America. That's all I guess I should say.
Yeah. Wake up and put clothes on before you come to the office, preferably. Sir, speaking of that mandate, the American people really, really need this president and Congress to get a handle on illegal immigration from a couple different angles. Obviously shutting down the border, but also removing the criminal aliens who are already here, the worst first. Do you happen to know a number or any of the details surrounding how many of those criminal murderers, assaulters, people like that who have actually been deported so far?
Well, I know they deported, I think, over 12,000 people. And I missed a point there earlier, John, on the tariffs. The tariffs are a beautiful thing right now because they're not putting any tariffs on anything. But Canada and Mexico realize that cowboy we have in the White House, dadgum, he might do it. And the world realizes he might do it. But yeah, I think it's around 12,000 we've deported. I don't know the numbers. What worries me about some of those dirt bags that we deport is somehow they might hook or crook, might get back in the country. I would almost, if they mess with a child or a lady or anybody in a physical manner, again, this kids might be watching. I think we ought to send them home in a box.
Mm-hmm. Wow, it is right now an extraordinary, different feeling in the country. There's optimism that I haven't sensed among everyday people. There's a sense that we're going to get to the right business. The big thing that I think will push a lot of people over the top is when a truly shrunken government is legislated into existence. Give us an update on how the talks are going in Congress. Yep. It does seem like there's a lot of unanimity. I know 1 or 2 bills, but at the end of the day, I think everyone wants to cut a lot this time, don't they?
Yeah, they do. I just left a meeting with Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's going to be doing a wonderful job as chair lady of our DOJ committee, and just some of our priorities. And those are the kind of things that America, I spoke to a little group in Washington County, it's not in my district, a group of ladies invited me up and had wonderful barbecue dinner, lunch, and it was just wonderful. But the place was packed. They ran out of sweet tea. And in the South, that's, you don't have sweet tea, the terrorists win pretty much. That's a grace. But everything they talked about was what you all just said. They're so fired up. They're so optimistic about this. These people are talking about how they think their grandchildren are going to have a shot at the American dream that they had. And I think that we got to remember the bigger picture in all this. There's going to be some pain involved in some of this, and we might not get eggs down to the price that that people want. That seems to be their focus group thing. They mention eggs and billionaires, and just forget about the drag shows for kids in Guatemala or whatever. But they've done their research on that. But America is fired up, and I believe, as you stated earlier, they're turning off the televisions on the big three, and they're paying attention to you all, and they're paying attention to the internet and X. And this, I was looking for my phone, like that little thing right there, and that's they're paying attention to that more and more. And the big boys cannot do anything about it. Matter of fact, we had a call from one of the big three today wanting me to come on because they feel like they weren't giving a fair shot at things. So we're debating on how that's going to go. But it's a new day. But hold us accountable. Dadgum, let's not forget this thing.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Sir, speaking of exorbitant spending, I consider any dollar of American taxpayers that goes overseas and funds any terrorist organizations, Hezbollah, Hamas, Boko Haram, whoever, doesn't matter. I know that you are still pushing your no tax dollars to terrorist act. What's the holdup? So common sense.
Congress. I couldn't even find a Senate sponsor last go around.
That's crazy.
What in the world? If you think $40 million a week we know of, Trump said it's more like 40 billion, but I think it's probably around 140 or a little more than that million a week we're sending just to the Taliban. Mm-hmm. And so I think you that just touches on how big it could be everywhere when you're disclosing all this USAID stuff. And I was told that we might get some movement on that bill this week, and I've got Senator Sheehy and Tommy Tuberville and Senator Haggerty, my buddy out of Tennessee, fellow Tennessean. He's going to help us over there in the Senate. And we loaded up the cart in the House. People just came after me when that first came out. We've got some real good. Sean Ryan, one of the top podcasters in the country or the world, I guess, right now. He's the one who brought that to my attention, and we've been talking to folks over there and how much impact this is causing. But I want to remind people, there's over 100, I was told by the former Afghanistan president, there's over 100 members of the Taliban in our dadgum country right now. And we don't know where they are. And that, to me, that's scary. My head's on a swivel every time I'm outside anywhere. We better wake up. We better wake up. This gift we've given by God, we better quit asking him for to help us. We better start asking him to forgive us for all the nonsense we pulled, the 300,000 children lost at the border and just the whole thing. It's a new day in America. Let's keep it going.
So in a little bit, the president and the prime minister Netanyahu will step out and we'll take some questions, and the country will get a little taste of foreign policy accomplishments this week. New tough sanctions on Iran, new tough sanctions on Cuba. Two regimes that this administration, I think, potentially has a chance to overthrow just through pressure. Do you think regime change is possible in one or both of those countries during President Trump's second term?
I always do, but America always loses its guts.
Yeah.
And we, just like we left those poor Cubans down there at Bay of Pigs, we should have called in the airstrikes. We had the people there. We could have done it. We were already going to get blamed for it anyway. Why not take the hit? A lot of things like that in history that just ticked me off. We didn't have we got a cowboy in the White House, and I love it. I love it because nobody knows what he's going to do. And I always go back to Soleimani, that evil terrorist. How they identify him? By his ring finger. That's all that was left. He had this ugly ring on his finger, and he didn't ask Nancy Pelosi. He didn't ask the House. He didn't ask the dadgum United Nations or Congress or anybody for permission. Trump just took them out. And that's the kind of leader we've got now. And dadgummit, let's pray for his safety.
I love it. Yeah. Sir, it is always an honor when you come on the show. We always learn so much. We laugh a little bit, but we get a lot of serious discussion. The sort of straight talk Americans are wanting more of from Washington. Great honor to have you on the show today. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, guys. Love y'all. That's why they're firing at us, folks. We're over the target. Let's keep on.
You are right over the target. Thank you, sir. Good to have you on. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we're going to take you out to the White House where President Trump is set to give those remarks. We'll have that in just a few minutes right after these messages. Native Path Collagen is made with only type 1 and type 3 collagen fibers. These are the two most important types as they make up about 90% of the collagen in your body, found in our cartilage, found in our bones, skin, hair, nails, guts, and more. A lot of our other brands use a rainbow of fibers and fillers, but all you really need for maximum benefits are types 1 and 3. Native Path is a single ingredient collagen. No fillers, no additives, no artificial sweeteners, and they're third-party tested for heavy metals. It is also completely flavorless, so you can put it in anything, coffee, smoothies, soup even. Because Native Path's recipe is a peptides formula, it's more bioavailable, meaning it's absorbed into the body more easily and mixes much better than other brands. No clumping at all, and best of all, Native Path offers really amazing bundle deals where you can get 3 and 6 packs at a fraction of the price of other collagen brands. Native Path has sold over 5 million jars of collagen, has over 1 million happy customers, and over 8,000 5-star reviews, and a 365-day no-risk guarantee. They even have an 800 number you can call with questions about usage, recipes, ingredients, and you'll speak to a live human. How about that? They want to help you. My favorite is their private FB community where everyone is sharing success stories, recipes, and just being kind to one another on this journey we call life. Do me a favor, go visit getnativepath.com/justnews. That's getnativepath.com/justnews and start your transformation today. One more time, getnativepath.com/justnews.
Welcome back, everybody, to Just the News, No Noise. We are staying right on top of that press conference that is set to happen in just a few seconds. It is in the offing, as they say.
Oh, yeah.
President Trump and Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu, the first state leader to visit the White House since President Trump took office.
Yeah.
And we have our very own Brian Glenn there on the ground. You're not going to see him. He's off camera, but you see the podium there where the two world leaders will join each other to answer questions from the press. Speaking of the press, Brian, President Trump and his very recent comment regarding a possible eviction notice for Palestinians living in Gaza. I am sure that the media is having a heyday with that comment.
My goodness, I was actually in what they would call the break room here when he made that comment, and it was a total meltdown, as you would expect, as it literally sent earthquakes across the media spectrum in regards to that comment. Let me set the tone here in this room. We've got some officials that have just walked out of here that you might notice on the screen. I am actually behind the media riser. We've probably got in here 200, 250 different media outlets from around the world, as this is a huge event. The procession coming in here earlier at about 4 o'clock was amazing. I talked to people have been here a long time, say, Brian, we've never seen such pageantry for a foreign dignitary to come in here as they did today. It seems like, we got a little bit of motion. Let's see. Let's listen in real quickly. We could be starting. We are live here in the East Room, getting ready for President Trump and Bibi Netanyahu to come through here. So let's listen in real quickly, John.
Absolutely. There's a lot of both staffs, advisors about coming into the room. They usually followed by the world leaders right after. That's a common scene you'll see just before the president and his guests come out. So not an uncommon scene. One I saw many times at the AP when I was a reporter. So, all right.
Yeah, it's certainly. But what I will say though, the intensity of this meeting is really at an all-time high, and you look at history and what can play out here as a result of these meetings is historic, and I think the world knows it. That's why they're here. Like I said, there's probably 200, 250 media outlets in here,
right,
all focused on this. And let's listen to it. I want to make sure I don't talk over this, but let's listen in real quickly, as it looks like we're getting closer to have an entry here. I'm seeing a little bit of security moving around there on the side. We're certainly glad to be here bringing this coverage to you live, John and Amanda.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's an important moment. And I'll tell you, one of the things I know is being talked about behind the scenes, Amanda, is the possibility of building on the Abraham Accords and maybe having some announcements in the next few months. Qatar comes up, Saudi Arabia. You could have the entire or a large part of the Sunni Arab world aligned with Israel before the end of this year against Iran, which has really become the big villain in all that has happened the last few years. It'll be interesting to see if that comes up today in the questioning. Yeah,
and I have no doubt that prior to this meeting, President Trump already had his ask ready, already had a plan for these alliances and these relationships and these conflicts, frankly. Brian, I want to ask you what you think President Trump has built relationships with a lot of world leaders recently, Bolsonaro, Bukele, of course, Viktor Orban, a lot of these their country first type leaders. But the first leader that he met with was not any of them. It wasn't our allies in the UK, Keir Starmer, Prime Minister of the UK, or anybody like that. It was Benjamin Netanyahu. What does that say about that relationship?
Well, it says it's strong. Obviously, President Trump, for a president to absolutely be, I would say, admired across the world and respected from all these world leaders just tells you how much influence he has in not only U.S. policy, but world policy as well. And I think that this today, indication of how much attention is brought to this. And of course, it's interesting as a media because everything he says really resonates. And a lot of the media loves to pick apart every single aspect of a statement, which we talked earlier, John, about, President Trump saying, why would they want to move back?
Right.
It's rubble. It's going to take decades to rebuild that area. And some in the media landscape would look at that as being insulting to a certain degree. And he's like, it's a common sense approach. And I think that's what makes President Trump so special as a leader. He's able to take things, break it down to a common sense level, and he's perfect on the messaging. And the way they have this room positioned, I mean, John, this thing was supposed to start at 5:10. It is now 6:22 local time, which makes me think there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes that we may not be privy to. And so hopefully tonight, when they finally step on those podiums, we're going to be able to have a better understanding and some clarity exactly what could be developing from this solution.
Yeah, it's really important to remember as we look at the two flags sitting, the Israeli flag and the American flag side by side, that President Trump's first foreign policy victory of his 47th presidency actually occurred days before when he got the peace deal that Joe Biden couldn't get through. He got it through. He made a big ask of Benjamin Netanyahu. There's a lot of tension in Israel about what Israel had to give up to get that deal. It'll be interesting to see how they come out talking about what the next steps are to build on that peace deal. I think a lot of people were listening to that. But the first victory of the Trump presidency occurred before he was even president on the world stage. Pretty remarkable.
It is. And I will say this, it's kind of hard to follow Congressman Burchett. When Tim Burchett is on, let me tell you something, he is a tough act to follow. But today, this is quite the scene here, as you expect in the East Room. And of course, John and Amanda, we were here just yesterday with the Florida Panthers. President Trump met with the NHL champions, the Stanley Cup champions, the Florida Panthers, in this very room. So you talk about the diversity of communication and talks over the last 24 hours in this room. It's something else. And we'll just see how this all plays out. But, now we're sitting at 6:24 here local time. I would imagine if I was a betting man, guys, here we go. Some people are starting to enter now. Let me just.
We'll see the president in a second here. Yep.
Yeah, let me just dip out. Let's listen in.
And more of the inner circle coming in there from both sides, Israel and the United States. I can see some of the advisors there. This is going to be an interesting moment, I think, in understanding where this very tenuous peace deal, which is held for the whole first 2 weeks of the Trump presidency, where it goes next. And Brian said something profound. I think he's right. President Trump's way of analyzing Gaza wasn't politically motivated. It's how a CEO would look at a situation, which is you can't bring people back to a place that doesn't have any infrastructure left because it was leveled. That common sense approach is what differentiates them for so many of the political apparatchiks that often have taken the podium and tried to make excuses from a political vantage point. Yeah. President Trump is a bottom line guy, and I think his comments they were aimed at that, Amanda.
And one of the saddest aspects of the story of Gaza and what has taken place there, you look at this strip along the Mediterranean Sea,
right,
and absent of Gaza, what is north of that and what is south of that is Israeli domain, the difference between these two areas is unbelievable. Like you said, Gaza looks like a leveled construction site. Yeah. And then the rest of Israel, obviously you have all of these different religions and peoples living together, coexisting relatively peacefully together. Yeah. And then Gaza, a very, very stark contrast.
From the days of Arafat forward, the Palestinians have just not been able to govern themselves in a way that could build an economy. And Israel has the capability to help them build the economy, but the tensions and the violence that the Palestinians and their Iranian allies have inflicted have made it impossible to make progress. This may be the moment, especially with those new Iranian sanctions, Brian, where Iran may be so buckled down it may not have the money to create mischief, and maybe Netanyahu could reach out and create the sort of deal with the Palestinians that have been unachievable. I mean, Bill Clinton came close in '93. I was there the day the handshake occurred, but we didn't quite get there. Donald Trump is the sort of guy who maybe can broker a deal, and the economy's got to be a starting point, because that's what disenfranchises so many Palestinians towards anger.
Right.
They don't have an economy, they don't have a job, so they turn to anger, and that leads to the violence that we see, the cycle of violence. It's crazy.
And how many times have we seen this instance where you have a Democrat administration, in that case, Bill Clinton, but
Right.
In the case of Russia, the Russian reset that had, according to Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, tremendous promise, and then that just
Nope.
kind of fizzled out.
Empty fizzle.
And then Donald Trump comes along and relatively stabilizes that relationship in that region. And then the same thing here. Joe Biden practically blowing up relationships, blowing up the negotiations. Although if you asked him in that press conference when he turned around and gave that Cheshire grin, who deserved credit,
Yep.
and he said, "What did he say? Are you kidding?"
Yeah.
And then you have Donald Trump coming along like a custodian cleaning up the mess.
Yeah, it is. I mean, the early part of the Trump presidency is an elephant sweeping operation to just clean up the mess that Joe Biden did. But he made progress a lot quicker. I mean, you look at some of the engagement. El Salvador today saying, we'll take our people back. Panama agreeing to throw the Chinese out from the port. Really significant slippages that occurred under Joe Biden have been reversed very quickly by Donald Trump. And almost by 6-8 hours a day, you see 2 or 3 of these a day. It's almost impossible to keep abreast of it. But I do think that we're going to see some more, and we might hear some news tonight. I know they were working on a few things to try to make some announcements tonight. We'll see if they were able to reconcile the differences and get there tonight. Brian, was there any guidance about what to expect at this event today? Any policy announcements or pronouncements that could potentially come out of it?
Nothing that was in the advance. Now, I think we have a little bit of a silence order here. I'm just listening in. Perhaps I will say this, that the security around this area has been intense the last 2 days.
Sure.
Not only what I call the January 6th style fencing up around 2 blocks or so outside of this area. Plus, we've seen a lot of DC police, Secret Service police outside several blocks around here in preparation. If you're wondering about the amount of protest, there are some protesters across the street. They have been getting louder throughout the day. So the typical scene that you would experience here from a counter voicing of what's going on right now. But in terms of advanced messaging, though, John, I have not heard anything as at this point, but like I said earlier, the longer you don't see them out here means they're communicating behind the scenes. So maybe we'll have some new developments that we'll hear here shortly.
Yeah, I mean, the last couple of times Netanyahu was here with Biden, it was such an awkward feel to it. I mean, you could just tell that there was really no rapport between the United States and Netanyahu with the Biden policy. And these two men are very warm. President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu, they really trust each other. They have a warm relationship. They understand what each needs to accomplish, and they work towards that. And that reboot that just a good personal chemistry creates is going to, I think, probably result in some actions today that might surprise us. If not today, tomorrow. It'll be really interesting. Give us an sense the rest of this week. Donald Trump had a really good day today. 2 more of his major nominees have gotten out of committee now, Pam Bondi and
RFK Jr.
And RFK Jr. Those were big ones, as well as Tulsi Gabbard getting out today. So we could see Pam Bondi, I think approved tomorrow morning, either tonight or tomorrow morning.
Tonight,
Could be tonight. We got a veteran secretary formally approved today, so we got the VA, and our great veterans across this country have got their leader and a guy who's going to be transformative. We've had Doug Collins on this show. I know, Brian, you've had him many times. He is a transformative figure. He's going to fix an agency that needs a lot of fixing.
And he cares so much about veterans,
He
being
does.
one himself.
Yeah,
well, actually, no, I guess he's
still active
reserved.
duty until he became a cabinet secretary. I think he had to give it up for that, but he gets it. So, and a good Georgian as well. So he gets good common sense Georgian.
Brian, when they come out and give this press conference, President Trump has very, very strong rhetoric. He also backs it up. We saw that in the first administration, and I think that's why we have seen such significant action on many of these policy fronts so swiftly in the responses from other world leaders. But you take that and you contrast that with Prime Minister Netanyahu, and he's a little bit more soft-spoken. That dichotomy, that synergy, if you will, between the communication styles, it's quite effective, isn't it?
It is. And, we look to see exactly how effective President Trump was with communicating with the president of Colombia. Remember, as far as he was like, yes, you are going to take them. And of course, they reversed stance clear on that. You're going to like it. I love that line you put on there. But, he does have a way of communicating with these leaders. And I think Amanda, you're absolutely right. The dichotomy between these two leaders is something special. And I think you can see the friendship. You can definitely see the difference between Bibi Netanyahu meeting with Trump versus meeting with Biden and what that chemistry looked like. So obviously, it could be getting. Boy, I tell you, every time it gets silent, you think there's going to be a walkout here any moment. And we have.
This is bringing back great memories as a young reporter. I'm ready. Oh, it's not happening. It's going to happen. No, it's not going to happen.
Well, it's really funny because we were talking offhand about being on the campaign for as long as I've been on. I know that you can have a certain timetable that you think things are going to happen.
Yeah,
but you know what? When it comes to President Trump, it never happens on that time frame. And we're kind of experiencing that today.
Oh, yeah.
Now, we'll say this. We're going to look at the schedule for the rest of the week. Obviously, tomorrow, I believe at 3 p.m., he's scheduled to sign some executive orders.
Great.
In regards to keeping, I believe, boys out of women's sports. That's a big campaign message that he ran on very hard. So we expect that to be very popular with the base. And then, of course, we could possibly have a press conference in the briefing room tomorrow. We'll keep an eye on that. But busy 14 days or so. We got 2 weeks into this thing, and it seems like from a media standpoint, it is a conveyor belt of information and action. So it's been quite the experience to cover this. And of course, transitioning from the campaign to the White House. John and Amanda, these are all the issues. When it's really interesting, whenever he starts talking about tariffs and you hear Republicans and Democrats become so shocked, if you covered President Trump at all, or if you cared to tune in for at least 1 hour of any campaign speech, you knew exactly what he's saying. We often hear promises made, promises kept. He has told the American people exactly what he's going to do on this first 100 days. And I find it no shock at all. Every time we wake up in the morning, we get the agenda, we find exactly what he's going to be either addressing or some of these policies. We know that. Now that Congress is back in session, actually they should be voting right now. The first votes were at 6:30.
That's right.
They've got a lot of work to do. And you look at these executive orders, John, and you look at this in the fact that they're great, but we need to make sure there's legislation that Congress works together to put this stuff. Yeah. That is so important. Like, we can get all excited about these executive orders, but if Congress absolutely is inactive, we don't have a plan. This is what I'd like to see happen, John and Amanda. I'd like to see these executive orders go straight to Speaker Johnson. Yep. All of a sudden, they get these things drafted up, get it on the floor for a vote, pass it, send it over to the Senate, let them do their stamp for approval, and get these things into law. It needs to be a conveyor belt of legislation coming out, or this is obviously done for nothing. Because 4 years from now, you don't know how things could change. God willing. Yeah. It could all be reversed. So if I was in charge of that, in leadership in Congress, I would make sure that everything that moves out of here from the executive order goes directly to Congress, and we get that going and get these things put into legislation. Because as you know, and Congressman Burchett really laid it out. We have such a slim majority that if someone has the flu, if someone has a family emergency, quite honestly, we can lose our majority very, very quick. And of course, if there's any push to vacate the chair, it doesn't take much to do that as well. So Democrats, they're on our heels, and we have to be on our game on every level. And of course, I'd like to see a little bit more aggressive actions out of the speaker. But we'll see how that plays out when they resume today at 6:30. For first vote. So here we are.
It's so funny that you mentioned that. You're right over the target on this. I was talking to Congressman Abe Hamadeh, one of the new faces in Washington, and he was in a briefing today with leadership where they are trying to codify as many things coming out of executive orders into law in the first big bill that they put together. So there'll be lots of different policy items that are codified into law by Congress. So for two reasons. One, to make sure it can't be easily reversed, and two, to not create the sort of schisms we saw with Joe Biden, where the courts would overturn Joe Biden because Congress wasn't on the same page. So they're very cognizant. He said that those conversations are occurring hourly in Congress right now. I was very encouraged to hear that. One of the big ones, and something we might even hear about tomorrow, I'm hearing some rumblings that President Trump is close to finishing his executive order to abolish the education department. Now, that can't formally happen until Congress follows up, but that is a big moment if that happens this week.
Oh, that's a big moment. And of course, you have Linda McMahon over that department, and she has not, shied away from discussing that or commenting on that. So, I mean, it's nice to know that she is willing to make changes that we need to do. And then, of course, you look at DOGE and you look at some of the things that's being brought up in that committee, the subcommittee headed by Marjorie Taylor Greene. I mean, she's called out, NPR, PBS, holding them in front and saying, "Wait a minute,
on this show,
on this show, that's we've got a lot of government money going to organizations that are they necessarily biased in one direction?" So I think that's a wonderful thing. But when you start to look at some of these other organizations, and I'm going to fast forward a little bit,
right? Like
a Planned Parenthood, what does that look like? DOGE is looking into absolutely trimming the fraud, abuse, and I guess spending on these organizations. So when you look at the Democrats that are a part of this subcommittee on DOGE, are they necessarily interested in finding out the fraud, abuse, and corruption in our government? Or are they in there to basically stop Republicans looking into the fraud, abuse, and the corruption in some of these departments? So it's going to be very interesting to watch that subcommittee develop over the next several months in regards to looking into all of this. Look, that's been one of the things that President Trump has run on, is let's get the corruption and fraud out of our government in every aspect. And so we'll see. We'll see who gets on the mat first. I think coming up, I think we got a lot as far as the Medicare is concerned. I think there's some corruption in that that's been brought up. So we'll see how that develops. And it's going to be one of these fun things to watch. But once again, I say this: are the Democrats actually genuinely interested in exposing the fraud, abuse, and corruption in our government, or are they just there to block? Or yes, exactly. And so you got
aiding and abetting fraud could be their legacy if they don't start to engage in this. Brian, we have somebody who's been through a lot of these events, the former chief of staff of the White House in the first Trump presidency. Mark Meadows with us. I'm going to bring Mark in because it looks like we might have a little bit more time before the president and the prime minister come out. Mark, do we have you on? There he is.
We do. Hey, it's great to be with you both, and certainly it's a big night for President Trump, but it's been a big night every night since January 20th. I mean, I can't believe so much has been accomplished, and your previous guest was just talking about whether the Democrats are going to be serious about rooting out fraud. They don't see it as fraud. They see it as responsible spending, and that's the problem. The American people don't agree with them.
That's such a great point.
Yeah, if somebody doesn't see it as a problem, they're not going to want to fix it.
They're not going to fix it.
I want to ask you about one aspect of this. We were just talking with Brian about the conveyor belt aspect of President Trump's policies. There's also been a conveyor belt aspect to his communication. Practically from morning to night, and you flicked at this a moment ago, every night has been a big night, every morning has been a big morning, every afternoon has been a big afternoon. President Trump is continuously communicating with the American people. How effective do you think that is when it comes to people who are maybe middle of the fence, maybe center left, who maybe didn't necessarily agree with his policies, but they appreciate the transparency?
It's funny you bring that up. I was talking to a neighbor just about an hour and a half ago, Tom, and Tom said, what I love about this president is he'll answer any question. The transparency is unbelievable. And so you take a guy like him who may not have been a Trumpster all along, and he appreciates the fact that there's this unbelievable transparency. Listen, it's the energy that President Trump has. You need to be praying for Susie Wiles as the chief of staff. She's getting no sleep, I can tell you. I know
that firsthand, don't you?
But the other is he, he always works around the clock, and a lot in the legacy media want to say, well, he doesn't work, he doesn't read. Let me just tell you, that's because they didn't work for him. And now those same legacy media people, they're hoping that he doesn't work because he's getting so much done that he promised the American people he would do.
They're just exhausted. And the Democrats have had the zone so flooded they don't even know what to respond to, which is a great political strategy because he's moving the ball down. I want to turn to something that I know you've been in the middle of. You have such an influential voice in Washington, even to this moment. There's a lot of debate about how we're going to get the CR done and how all of this executive action gets codified into law and the spending gets cut in there. Can you give us some insights of what you're learning, what you think your best guess is what will happen?
Yeah, so John, you were mentioning it, and you're very kind to say that I'm in the middle of it. You're probably better connected to Capitol Hill than most reporters ever thought about being. But I can tell you, I've been on the phone with a number of members today, really trying to make sure that they deliver on not only the tax cuts, but a whole lot of this spending. To codify, as you were saying, some of these executive orders in statute. I can tell you they made good progress. They're not there. We won't. I don't believe that we'll see anything in terms of a handshake agreement until next week. Okay. But we're so much further along than we were. And I can tell you this, that both conservatives and moderates are now talking to each other on the Republican side of the fence, because we know we can't count on a single Democrat. Right. But the markets should be happy, because I think the bond market, they're going to see some cuts and some serious things. And I think Elon Musk did a good job with that, because he challenged Congress to act. He says, we can do this. President Trump can do this with the stroke of the pen. Now it's your turn to step up. And so I think we're going to see that in the next 72 hours, maybe 4 or 5 days at the most.
Wow, that's a big moment.
Sir, John and I were working on a story earlier regarding the DNC and their new election of their chairman and their co-chairman, Ken Martin, David Hogg, both white men. This is for a party that champions diversity at any cost, frankly, over merit. Do you think that the DNC maybe saw a little bit of the light and they chose two people who, especially in the case of Ken Martin, claims that he wants a sense of normalcy brought back to the party?
Well, he's claiming that, but deep down, deep-rooted in there, we know that they can't walk away from it. How do we know that? And you know, you're hitting on this. You know, it's interesting. They're all about diversity, but yet they don't put someone at the chair level that would represent, quote, those values, at least not from a physical appearance standpoint. But I can say this. When you see the Democrats going crazy at the USAID headquarters yesterday, that has everything to do with two things. They want to grow government, and the liberal woke agenda that has been largely the Democrat Party for the last at least 4 years under the Biden administration, they're embracing that again. We saw that yesterday, and you shouldn't have to look any further than the outrage that we saw from both senators and House members yesterday when USAID was just put on a leash.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's amazing. And it's a funny thing, the Democrats, they're doubling down on this agency. It's an agency that almost every everyday American doesn't really care about. It doesn't affect them at the dinner table. And yet they're holding it because they're at that altar of the big government. They can't get away from it. They're welded to it. It's just remarkable. I want to ask you about some of the possibilities. As I think President Trump and Elon Musk and others are going to be able to cut more than people expect. There's more fraud than we expected. When you start rolling up some savings, is there a smart political play to attach to one of these bills, rerouting some of the money back into Medicare and Social Security, not only to do the right thing for those programs, which are coming up on their deadline, but to make the last vote for the Democrats hard to do?
Yeah, I think there's a real good reason to do that. I don't see it happening as much on the Medicare side of it, but I can tell you in the first administration, President Trump was probably the only president that was willing to make Social Security stronger. And listen, when he's talking about no taxes on Social Security benefits, that's like giving every senior who relies on Social Security as their main safety net a raise. And so, yeah, I do see him doing that and potentially augmenting the Social Security program with some of these savings. But the bigger part of that is when we start to look at at some of the waste, fraud, and abuse. And you mentioned USAID, you mentioned the Department of Education. Here's a novel idea. Why don't we take all these major universities who get tax relief for their big foundations and say no more student loans for anybody that is postgraduate? Let the universities that get the tax breaks cover that and let them go on the hook for that. You know, little things like that could go a long way. But the president, listen, he's bold. He's willing to lean into it. And he's not afraid of a little controversy. And what are we getting in response? Well, it looks like we're getting the Panama Canal back. We got hostages back. We're getting all kinds of benefits. We've got a securer border in Canada and Mexico as a result of, you know, the tariffs that he put in place and then paused. Listen, it's an exciting time to be in Washington, D.C., but it's a more exciting time to be on Main Street and be able to applaud a president that's actually delivering on his campaign promises.
Wow.
Sir, before we let you go, all of these conversations surrounding USAID and doing away with it, lest we forget that this started with a conversation, just a request by DOJ to open the books. For any organizations or agencies that DOJ is looking into hereafter, does it set a tone for them that if you are transparent, if you do open the books, maybe you've got a little bit better of chance of not being in the crosshairs?
Yeah, listen, it's all about transparency, and Democrats want transparency unless it's with one of their pet projects. And if the American people knew what the federal government was spending at a Democrat directive, they would go crazy. You know, one of the silver linings, and there wasn't many silver linings to COVID, but one of the silver linings to COVID was parents started to understand what was happening in the classroom. What's the result? They start to get more involved in their children's education. I think they need to have local control of that. Hopefully we'll have that soon.
Yeah. Mark, you were there for the historic Abraham Accords, one of the greatest foreign policy achievements of the last century. Do you think behind the scenes of this conversation, other things going on today, that there's an opportunity to start moving towards Qatar and Saudi Arabia in additional expansions of those historic agreements?
Yeah, listen, had we had a second term right after President Trump and I left office in January of 2021, it would have happened then. Yep. I don't want to pre-guess and step in the way of the president or the Secretary of State, but I can tell you that they understand that what's good for the Middle East and good for the United States is good for the globe broadly. And the Prime Minister understands that. Listen, the very fact that we're having to buy a little time here waiting for this press conference is because there's a real relationship with Bibi Netanyahu and President Donald Trump. And so they're having real conversations. That only happens when you have mutual respect. That's right. And honestly, that you're willing to lean in when everybody else is telling you not to.
Yeah, that's very wise.
Sir, on the successful tariff conversation from President Trump, I think that a lot of American leaders keep that tool in the bottom part of their toolbox. But for President Trump being successful, do you think that's going to move to the top of the toolbox?
Mark, we're gonna head over President Trump and Prime Minister.
We'll let you go. All right.
Thank you, sir, for joining us tonight. All right, well, folks, we're going to not get away here. We're going to let you listen directly to the President and Prime Minister.
That's a lot of press. Congratulations. You bring them out. You really bring them out. Today, I'm delighted to welcome Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu back to the White House. It's a wonderful feeling and a wonderful event. We had fantastic talks, and thank you very much with your staff. He's the first foreign head of state to visit during our administration, and Bibi, I want to say it's an honor to have you with us. Over the past 4 years, the U.S. and the Israeli alliance has been tested more than any time in history. But the bonds of friendship and affection between the American and Israeli people have endured for generations, and they are absolutely unbreakable. They are unbreakable. I'm confident that under our leadership, the cherished alliance between our two countries will soon be stronger than ever. We had a great relationship. We had great victories together 4 years ago. Not so many victories over the past 4 years, however. In my first term, Prime Minister and I forged a tremendously successful partnership that brought peace and stability to the Middle East like it hadn't seen in decades. Together we defeated ISIS, we ended the disastrous Iran nuclear deal, one of the worst deals ever made, by the way, and imposed the toughest ever sanctions on the Iranian regime. We starved Hamas and Iran's other terrorist proxies, and we starved them like they had never seen before. Resources and support disappeared for them. I recognized Israel's capital, opened the American embassy in Jerusalem, and got it built, by the way. Built it too, just not only designated it, but got it built at a price that nobody's seen for 40 years. We got it built, it's beautiful, all Jerusalem stone, right from nearby, and it's something that's very special. And recognized Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights, something that they talked about for 70 years, and they weren't able to get it, and I got it. And with the historic Abraham Accord, something that was really an achievement that was, I think, going to become more and more important because we achieved the most significant Middle East peace agreements in half a century, but the Abraham Accords in particular, and I really believe that many countries will soon be joining this amazing peace and economic development transaction. It really is a big economic development transaction. I think we're going to have a lot of people signing up very quickly. Unfortunately, for 4 years, nobody signed up. Nobody did anything for 4 years except in the negative. Unfortunately, the weakness and incompetence of those years, those past 4 years, the grave damage around the globe that was done, including in the Middle East, grave damage all over the globe. The horrors of October 7th would never have happened if I were president. The Ukraine and Russia disaster would never have happened if I were president. Over the past 16 months, Israel has endured a sustained, aggressive, and murderous assault on every front, but they fought back bravely. You see that, you know that. What we have witnessed is an all-out attack on the very existence of a Jewish state in the Jewish homeland. The Israelis have stood strong and united in the face of an enemy that has kidnapped, tortured, raped, and slaughtered innocent men, women, children, and even little babies. I want to salute the Israeli people for meeting this trial with courage and determination and unflinching resolve. They have been strong. In our meetings today, the Prime Minister and I focused on the future, discussing how we can work together to ensure Hamas is eliminated and ultimately restore peace to a very troubled region. It's been troubled, but what's happened in the last 4 years has not been good. I want to thank Prime Minister Netanyahu for working closely with my transition team, the Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, who's here somewhere. Steve? Stand up, Steve, please. What a job you've done. What a good job you've done. Proud of you. Done a fantastic job. National Security Advisor Mike Waltz. Thank you, Mike, for working so well with us. Thank you. We have, in addition, Marco Rubio, who is on the phone right now, listening to every single word that we say, and he's going to be great. And Pete, congratulations. And Scott, congratulations. I see you're here. And Caroline's been doing a great job. She's really probably talked about more than anybody here. She's done a fantastic job, and thank you very much, Caroline. We're proud of you. But we'll only be satisfied when all of these problems are solved, and we have the team to solve them, and that's going to happen. And it's going to happen, I think, very quickly. I also strongly believe that the Gaza Strip, which has been a symbol of death and destruction for so many decades, and so bad for the people anywhere near it, and especially those who live there, and frankly, who's been really very unlucky. It's been very unlucky. It's been an unlucky place for a long time. Being in its presence just has not been good, and it should not go through a process of rebuilding and occupation by the same people that have really stood there and fought for it and lived there and died there and lived a miserable existence there. Instead, we should go to other countries of interest with humanitarian hearts, and there are many of them that want to do this, and build various domains that will ultimately be occupied by the 1.8 million Palestinians living in Gaza, ending the death and destruction and, frankly, bad luck. This can be paid for by neighboring countries of great wealth. It could be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 12. It could be numerous sites, or it could be one large site. But the people will be able to live in comfort and peace, and we'll make sure something really spectacular is done. They're going to have peace. They're not going to be shot at and killed and destroyed like this civilization of wonderful people has had to endure. The only reason the Palestinians want to go back to Gaza is they have no alternative. It's right now a demolition site. This is just a demolition site. Virtually every building is down. They're living under fallen concrete that's very dangerous and very precarious. They instead can occupy all of a beautiful area with homes and safety, and they can live out their lives in peace and harmony instead of having to go back and do it again. The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it too. We'll own it and be responsible for dismantling all of the dangerous unexploded bombs and other weapons on the site, level the site and get rid of the destroyed buildings, level it out, create an economic development that will supply unlimited numbers of jobs and housing for the people of the area. Do a real job, do something different. Just can't go back. If you go back, it's going to end up the same way it has for 100 years. I'm hopeful that this ceasefire could be the beginning of a larger and more enduring peace that will end the bloodshed and killing once and for all. With the same goal in mind, my administration has been moving quickly to restore trust in the alliance and rebuild American strength throughout the region. And we've really done that. We're a respected nation again. A lot's happened in the last couple of weeks. We are actually a very respected nation again. I ended the last administration's de facto arms embargo on over $1 billion in military assistance for Israel. And I'm also pleased to announce that this afternoon, the United States withdrew from the anti-Semitic UN Human Rights Council and ended all of the support for the UN Relief and Works Agency, which funneled money to Hamas and which was very disloyal to humanity. Today, I also took action to restore a maximum pressure policy on the Iranian regime, and we will once again enforce the most aggressive possible sanctions, drive Iranian oil exports to zero, and diminish the regime's capacity to fund terror throughout the region and throughout the world. We had no threat when I left office. Iran was not able to sell oil. Nobody was buying oil because I said, don't buy it. If you buy it, you're not doing any business with the United States. And Hamas was not being funded. Hezbollah was not being funded. Nobody was being funded. There would never have been an October 7th. 2 weeks ago, I once again designated the Houthis as a terrorist organization. They're trying to destroy world shipping lanes, and that's not going to happen. And over the weekend, I ordered airstrikes against senior ISIS leaders hiding in the caves of Somalia and took them out. Here in America, we've begun the process of deporting foreign terrorists, jihadists, and Hamas